okay, after he's done Manhattan, he goes on and he does something different. He does a musical, Pennies from Heaven, with Steve Martin and Bernadette Peters. And this is again, I think maybe after Manhattan, he wanted to experiment with a look of a time, just like he did with Versailles in the Paris in the 30s, and doing it with New York in the present. He's now looking at a Depression era frame and picture. And so what he does in this Depression era musical, he looks for different artists like Edward Hopper and different people who represent and Walker Evans photographs, and give you that idea of what the Depression was like. And then he mixes it with just an Art Deco sense of bright and reflective lighting, balanced once again with his sort of melancholic, dark frame. So here we have the great musical scenes. Here's Bernadette Peters. But look at the golds and the whites. This is blast out Depression era. Everything's coming up, roses hopefully, and here he's got just the use of white here. This is as blown out as you're ever going to get. Wonderful kids here, all at the piano, copying Busby Berkeley, who of course was the great musical director from the 30s. This is Busby Berkeley's Gold Diggers in 1935. It is a wonderful scene with all these pianos dancing and all these people playing these pianos. This is a prototypical Busby Berkeley shot, and so it's all rows of people, legs going up and down a Busby Berkeley kind of synchronized dancing. But here we go. He mixes that white fur collar with his signature Gordon Willis brown tones, and we see him perfectly here in the plaid dancing on the stage. Very much, it's lit, it's happy, yet it's done in that kind of underexposed brown way that Willis is making a signature for his films. And here we have Bob Hoskins looking through these purpley lit beads, and it's wonderful. Again, we talked earlier about his framing. Look how he frames this shot. He puts Bob a little off center here, but he opens those curtains, gives you a sense of depth because of the brown background, but he emerges from the frame, and the use of negative space, need we say anymore, it's just wonderful. We anticipate everything in the shot. And here we have Bernadette Peters, who we have in her dressing room, and look at how he gets depth in a shot that would normally be flat because we got yellowish gold against white, but by using a mirror, we get that gold doubled and reflected, so he can take a relatively flat color base and give it some depth. And he does a similar thing here with a silhouette. The silhouette with Steve Martin up front is backlit by the light of the street. It's a very Edward Hopper type of scenario. And of course, when he gets to the diner in this movie, he has to go to Edward Hopper because Edward Hopper's got the iconic Nighthawks painting. And this is what they did in the movie, copying the Nighthawks painting, but this is the Nighthawks painting that Edward Hopper did. You can see the background street, and we can see the relatively dim light, the shadows, very much Edward Hopper, but Gordon Willis totally pays homage to him, as you can see with the upper shot and the painting below. And later in the movie, he will go on, because this is Depression era. He takes other iconic imagery of the 30s, in which, of course, most of everybody would immediately go to the Weimar sort of decadent imagery that we see in the late 1920s and early 30s in Germany, and we have a red palette and a brown palette together, just like we had here in Parallax. He's going off of that, but he's copying like the paintings of George Gross, who was a German painter whose idea of decadence and chaos of the 20s crash and then the depression that followed was very much a palette that showed the disturbance that was going on at the time. And here we have Willis copying it, so that he's trying to take that cabaret type of imagery and he's giving it the George Gross, very saturated crimson dark nightclub, little purples and crimson and gold, very, very decadent dark journey into a escape here. So after he does Pennies of Heaven, he of course does the movie that most people will remember him for. Um, he's working here with Francis Ford Coppola. You can see again looking through the eyepiece. This is The Godfather. Now, his influence on Coppola's masterpiece it was huge. It was not really groundbreaking. We can see from what he's been leading up to, but his low light photography and his underexposed film, and his choice of sepia tones to denote the period, which again was the 30s. It was this basic visual palette for the movie, and here I think the Godfather trilogy, as we know, is famous for its warm tones. But here's the famous first shot of the Godfather. Extremely slow zoom out from the Undertaker's face. The shot begins fully zoomed into his face, right here, with only his forehead and cheeks directly lit. So he's basically buried in darkness. But slowly as he speaks, the camera zooms out, and the shot finishes behind the Godfather's shoulder. The Undertaker is positioned just off center, and the Godfather fills almost the entire left-hand third of the shot. The only lighting is an overhead source that barely lights the Undertaker's face. So you can see from the parallax view, he'd already experimented here with this low, underexposed lighting, but now he's putting it to great effect. Here, later, the Undertaker's office lighting is different, it's minimalistic, but basically, in the background, we got Godfather himself is reflected here. His skin shines a little on the light, but look, it's nothing but blackness. And this movie nicknamed him, gave Gordon Willis the nickname Prince of Darkness. That's what they call him as far as his director of photography contribution, because he's only lighting actors, just using a single overhead source. So this can be seen right here. There's an overhead source on one actor, and then Brando's got a little black backlighting here, but it's hard to see because his eyes, because the backlighting makes it underexposed, and the eyes are shadowy, and the white colors, even the white colors, are muted in a kind of creamy color, and the dark areas of the screen are underexposed, and so this is his signature Gordon Willis look here. Another shot of another scene in the movie, only two sources of light, the lamp and an overhead light. Robert Duvall's barely seen in the background. So what we have here is a wide angle shot, so that the foreground, we've got Duvall not in focus, but so we can see the foreground. But the majority of colors are his palette, his underexposed palette of browns and yellows. And this is a good example here. It's when it comes to the Godfather, his eyes are usually masked, and the only movement on his face is his mouth. You can barely see his emotions, and his suits, they just fade into the background. Here with this silhouette, we can just see how muted and how ominous everything is. When we get to Michael Corleone, which is of course Pacino's role here, we have a scene here where he's going to become the Don, but here he's in a car, and to show this isolation, Willis has him basically surrounded by darkness. His enemies are hidden, and he's into very little low light coming off the dashboard, illuminating him, and that's all. And so we get the foreshadowing of his dark journey. Here, most of the actors, almost all the dialogue in this movie takes place at a table. And we can see here that he's starting to dress more and more like Don Corleone, and he's starting to relax, and he's starting to feel the power. But you can see everything. Again, the suit basically disappearing into the piano. And in the funeral here, he lights it. Gordon Willis lights it so that half the face is in darkness, so that we get the troubled soul, the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, the divided face. It's not pure anymore. And the film finishes with a repeat of that opening shot with the Undertaker, and he's got this zoom shot where Michael Corleone, Pacino, is revealed as the true mafia don. But look at the way Willis frames this, because it's very similar to, if we think of the parallax view, the way he framed Betty in this scene. So I think the style that he got with The Godfather basically made Willis into Willis. And what's interesting here is he takes these shots, and this we say, this, you look at the shot, that's a Gordon Willis shot. It's almost totally black, like Rembrandt. You just very rarely see anything. I mean, Rembrandt is always solid. Everything's drowning in black, and then a couple of lighting touches to see the features. And so what you got here, we got a wide-angle shot, which brings us the foreground closer, in the background, the observer being a little faded out, but still prominent, being in the center of the frame. And of course, here with a close-up, we don't see the eyes, we don't see half the face, but we get the emotion totally. We get the internal thoughts very clearly, just like we would do with a Rembrandt. And look at the color palette here. If you look at the range of that color, the dynamic range of that color palette, it's not wide, it's not extreme. We're not going from bright blue to vibrating red. It's all browns, muted earth tones. Whereas the next movie, Willis shot, he didn't have that choice because, again, working with a different director, he's working with Woody Allen and Annie Hall. And in Annie Hall, Woody's going to be demanding pastel colors to dominate the palette, because this is a love story. And so he wants the brighter pastels. And although you can see the Willis touch in the background, everything seems a little desaturated. But he wants the pale colors. And so, still, given that, Willis turns it into a movie that his palette dominates. Here's Woody in a classroom, but look at the classroom. The colors look straight out of The Godfather. They're desaturated colors. They're under lit and underexposed. Standing in line at a movie theater here, same thing. Underexposed, brown color palette, and here's a close up of standing again going to another movie, but we see that the wardrobe department, working with Willis, makes that palette that underexposed beige palette. We've got Duvall in this yellow dress, and Woody's in this brown, and the guy behind them is in this sort of kind of purplish brown, and so we get everything that lends itself to bleeding in the darkness. And even in his bedroom scenes here, we got single source light, which is pure Willis, and everything. What's the dominant color in that room? It's brown. Same here, single source of light, dominant brown. Even when Woody's partying in Annie Hall, and he does the famous scene where he sneezes into the cocaine, and it all goes up in a cloud. Funny scene, comedy. Normally we overlight and we make it very bright, but here, once again, we've got one source of light behind Diane Keaton there, reflecting off the bowl and the clothes, but still, it's kind of a golden. In order to show happiness, he merges out of the brown into the gold. That's as far as he'll go. Here is that golden touch brown, relaxing scene in an apartment, but not overly bright. It's muted. And on the street, back again here with the white pastels, the muted backdrop, and the final shot, showing Gordon using a wonderful way of using the store, with the line in the store dividing Woody and Diane, showing that they're together laughing, but still irrevocably separated. But look at that, the dominant tone with her plaid shirt and his suit coats is still brown, the brownish red chair, the reddish ketchup, and it's just, again, towards the red-brown spectrum. And finally, if you're going to be a great cinematographer, one thing you've got to do is feel fearless to break the rules, which is what he's doing here. Breaking the rule of thirds to a magnificent effect, because it brings Woody straight into our lives like he's talking to us face to face.